So this week we'll be looking at the God of Islam. So in the news recently, there's been a lot of controversy just if the God of Islam is really the same God of Christianity. Both um, these religions go back a very long time. Islam back to the 700s, and then the God of Christianity all the way back to the start of time, really. Even though he was the God of the Jews, and then now the God of the Christians. In my opinion, I do think to a point, yes, that that God, our God that we worship, is can be considered the same God of Islam. However, in the modern day, I do not believe that God is the same as Allah, and that is not at all what I'm getting at here. Um, but I'll try to explain my point further in these slides, and I hope you guys can follow along. So Abraham's covenant. God promised Abraham that he would make a nation out of him being Abraham. Um, and so this is kind of where God's promise came to Abraham that he would establish a line, and that God's promised people of Israel would come out of Abraham, and then eventually leading to the line of Jesus and David. Um, However, Abraham did not trust God that Sarah would bear a son, as they were kind of old and Sarah was not able to have any kids, and so he bore a son with Hagar, which was um, Sarah's servant, and he named his son Ishmael. However, God did give Sarah a son later in Genesis, and she called him Isaac, which was eventually the line that David and eventually Jesus came out of. So we'll talk about Ishmael and the Arabs here for a minute. So Ishmael, I would consider the father of the Arabs. You can trace back farther to one of the sons of Noah, coming out of that left and went populated um, the Arab region. However, here in Genesis 16, 15 through 16, it states that Hagar bore a son with Abram, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born, and he was 86 when she gave birth to Ishmael. So later in the story, I'll explain that Ishmael and Hagar were kind of driven away, and they had to go relocate, and eventually started the kind of the Arab nations. So Isaac and the Israelites. So Isaac was the son of Sarah that was later given to Sarah as God promised, and he was the father of the Israelite nations, as recorded in Genesis 21. Um, Isaac was the father of Jacob, and then Jacob had 12 sons, which became the 12 tribes of Israel. And then after the birth of Isaac, Hagar and Ishmael were sent away. That's kind of as I was explaining earlier. Um, with the birth of Abraham's own son, with his own wife, he kind of believed that Hagar and Ishmael were just kind of a constant reminder of the sin that he committed, um, and his distrust in God, so he kind of just sent them away. Um, so Ishmael, I believe that, so going back, I kind of believe that um, the God of Christianities or the Jews at this point, and the God of Islam later on, kind of had the same beginning, as Ishmael was born into a Jewish culture under Abraham. The Israel nation had not really been established yet, as they came from Abram's line, but there was the God of Noah, and then the God of Abraham that they were putting their faith in and their trust in. So Ishmael was born into this, and I don't know, it doesn't really explain if he grew up believing these and following Abraham's ways and trusting God or not. So Ishmael could have carried this tradition of trusting Abraham's God, which would have been later our God that as Christians we believe in. Um, and so from Ishmael's line, way down the line, Muhammad, the father of Islam, was a late descendant of Ishmael. So he could have, through just tradition and ancestry, could have come to know this same God, as we could put it here. So in early Islam, at the beginning of Islam, Muhammad had a vision from an angel claiming that to reveal the new law. So Muhammad just kind of had this vision, and this angel came to him and said that um, kind of just gave him the Quran as just kind of, this is kind of parallel to God showing Moses the way and to give him the Ten Commandments. This angel kind of came and gave the book of Quran to Muhammad to start this new religion. And so Muhammad then took the stories of the Bible and believed Ishmael was the true father of God's people, instead of Isaac, the father of the Israelites. So Muhammad kind of took these stories and kind of twisted them and kind of rewrote them in a way to fit Ishmael in there instead of Isaac. So in the story of when Abraham had to sacrifice Isaac, they kind of turned it to when Muhammad or Abraham had to sacrifice Ishmael and was saved with the lamb. So all of this kind of boils back down to that turning point in history when it was down to Isaac and Ishmael. So back into developing Islam. So as Islam developed, the Quran stated that there was one way to paradise, which is to earn salvation through good works. So this is kind of the big key difference between Islam and Christianity is that this strictly contradicts what God of the Bible declared as the way to salvation. Naturally, Jesus came and died for our sins so we could have that restored relationship with God. But under Islam, um, they just kind of believe that Jesus, he was a prophet and that he did come, but instead he just kind of was killed, and this wasn't the correct way to salvation. Um, so now is this the God of Christianity the same as the God of Islam? I do not believe that the modern God of Christian, which is still the same God. I'm not saying that God has changed in Christianity at all over the years. But the God of Christianity and the God of modern Islam, I don't believe are the same God. I believe Islam believes in Allah, which is their saving God, even though the idea of Allah probably stemmed from the idea of God of the Jews. Um, However, I don't believe that I do believe that Islam is deeply rooted in Christianity as they share many of the same stories and historical facts, just kind of as I mentioned earlier. They have a lot of the same stories going all the way back to Abraham and just kind of that turning point again that instead of choosing Isaac, that Abraham chose Ishmael to have God's people come through, and that um, just like Isaac had bore Jacob, and then he had the 12 tribes of Israel. Um, in Islam story, there are the 12 tribes of Arab that kind of like started to populate the Saudi Arabia and Iraq and Iran area. Um, so again, I do believe that Allah, the God of Islam, is deeply rooted in Christianity and based off of the God of Christianity. However, I do believe the God that we worship is the one true God and that He is the only saving God. So I hope you guys enjoyed and learned something from this presentation. Have a good day.